Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Gingerbread Bang. Uh, this will be more interesting read, and I really hope that you all are as eager as I am to find out what exactly is about to happen. Let us dive in. First, she made the legs, feet, calves, knees, thighs, hips, a few sections for the torso, chest, arms, head. She saved the cock for last, forming one, two roughly, the same size and shape as Paul's. Standing back from the unbaked parts, she decided to add a little more width to the cock. Why the hell not? Then it was time to bake. As each part came out of the oven, she slid it slowly into the wire rack, being careful not to scrape or damage the just baked dough. Once each part was hard, she piped on royal icing to join the pieces. A few hours later, not counting a dejected "I'm stuck at the farm" call from Paul, which interrupted her. "I'll be fine. Be safe and take your time," she said, and her doughy lover was ready. The only problem was, he wasn't moving. Clementine stood back, looking up and down his body, admiring her handiwork. Then she realized what she'd forgotten. Raiding the cupboards, she found Paul's stash of decorative candy. She gave the gingerbread man eyes, made of peanut butter cups, lips made of red licorice rope, nipples made of gumdrops, which made her giggle. And that was that. He wouldn't be needing clothing, she decided. This final touch gave him life. As soon as the second nipple was secured on his chest, the gingerbread man sat up on the counter, banging his head on the saucepan rack. Crumbs flew from his scalp. "Ow," he said in a strange voice. Then he saw Clementine, who was unfastening her apron. "I hurt my head." "Don't worry. I'll throw the crumbs out for the birds," she said, undoing her blouse, letting her breasts spill free. "What will they do?" "Never mind that." Clementine stepped out of her skirt, naked except for her panties. She gripped his firm cock, and the gingerbread man moaned. As she tugged on it, icing began to leak from its tip. So she bent to lick it away. He placed a hand on her neck, keeping her there. She was happy to taste his sugar-sweet member, swallowing as the flavor intensified. With a gasp, she pulled her mouth free and bent over, slipping her panties to one side. "Stick it in me," she moaned, guiding him to her slippery entrance. He did as he was told, grabbing onto her hips, his length meeting no resistance as it slid as deep as it could go. "Now fuck me, gingerbread man," Clementine instructed. "Fuck me. Fuck me as hard as you can." With hard, deep strokes, he did exactly that. She could feel the rough underside of his hands on her hips, leaving crumbs as they gripped tighter. It was a peculiar sensation, almost like having sex on the sand. To her delight, his cock wasn't the same texture, for some reason. It was gently rigid, the head swollen and curved, rubbing at parts of her walls, which never got attention unless she was fingering herself. The heady feeling of this new pressure made her groan. He pounded away at her, first with her legs between hers, with his legs between hers, excuse me, then spreading them so he could get a different angle, up into her cunt. This was better, deeper, she hissed in a breath as he ground it further in. She urged him to go deeper, bending forwards as far as she could, until she was gripping the opposite counter, feeling him stretch her wide. She was glad she'd added that extra layer of thickness to him. His girth was pushing her walls further than Paul ever had, making her juicier than ever. Pulling herself free from his still stiff prick, excuse me, She laid on the ground, sliding off her panties. He stood over her, watching her play with herself, opening her folds to invite him in. Instead, he positioned himself over her mouth, letting her taste her juices as well as his sweet, spiced rod. Dribbles of icing ran out over her tongue, and he sighed in pleasure. Releasing him, she pushed him down towards her dripping slit. He kissed around it a few times, huge sticky kisses, before sliding his cock in once more. Clementine lifted her legs to his shoulders, allowing him deeper access as he lunged forwards, stretching her pussy. Closing her eyes, she held her ankles and shoved herself forwards onto his length, taking it as deep as it could go until she was overwhelmed with sensation. Her orgasm surprised her with its intensity, flooding her walls and, for the first time, making her squirt. She roared in bliss as her juices burst from her, drenching the doughy cock inside her, as well as the thighs of the gingerbread man, who pulled himself in tight. His climax rose, and with a cry he let his sugary cum blast into her, prolonging her ecstasy. He pulled out, and one final arc of icing shot out and splattered onto her neck. Dropping her legs, she wanted to pull him close and kiss those ridiculous gumdrop nipples. But as she grabbed him, he began to sag. His purpose had been seen out, just like the doughy cock she'd pleasured before. He collapsed as fast as he'd risen, his gumdrop nipples landing on her chest before he collapsed. She picked out one of the gumdrops and popped it into her mouth. The sweet fruit taste spread across her tongue as the gingerbread man's body crushed against her belly. He was surprisingly heavy, almost as heavy as a real person, which made little sense. The whole thing seemed to be ridiculous, to be real, but the post-orgasm glow in her chest and the sticky slit said different. It had been fun, but like the gumdrop which had started to dissolve, the rush would only last so long. With a sigh, she started to clean up. "Clem, what smells so good in here?" Paul asked when he finally arrived home. Damn, she thought. Forgot to open the window. I was trying that recipe out, remember? Oh yeah, he said, putting his shopping bags down. So, her could give her a hug. Got some icing in your hair somehow. He pulled a glob of icing from her hair. With a wicked grin, she sucked it from his fingers, keeping them in her mouth. Rubbing a hand against his groin, she was pleased to find that she was having an effect on him, with no need for that special powder. "What's gotten into you?" Paul laughed, pressing against her. She felt his erection against her hip as she ground closer. "It doesn't matter," she laughed, pressing her mouth to his. "Let's make the most of it." His bags of shopping forgotten, she led him upstairs, away from the kitchen, and into her arms. Alright. So yeah, fabulous tale from N.L. Allen, The Gingerbread Bang. Buy it now on Amazon. Ta-ta.